We can still click on create a new question and continue where we left, but I'm not going to do that today in the interest of time. I trust that with the knowledge that you have from the previous question types, you will be well able to manage to create some new questions using these other types. And so if you click there to add, you can, as per usual, just add a question name and your question text, the default mark, and the rest of the settings. I'm sure it's easy for you to figure out. If you feel that some field is not familiar, there's usually a little question mark next to the field where you can click, and it gives you some information about what this field is about and or sometimes what you can do in order to make the most of it. So you can always read these. And we also have a lot of Moodle documents on the Moodle website itself. Usually, if you've seen our help documents, at the bottom of each document, we refer to a Moodle Docs page where you can find more information about the particular activity in Moodle. So we will go back to our course page, and on your home page, please click on Turn Editing On. Please scroll down to find the topic where you want to include the quiz. So the quiz we created in the past few sessions was from an activity from the health and safety link for topic. So I still need to scroll down to find this little link over here, add an activity or resource. So from this activity chooser, scroll down and find the quiz activity and click. So you will have a page like this, adding a new quiz to, and here you will see the name of the topic. So first of all, as per usual, you just give it a name, and I will say like Canadian superfoods. So for now, let's ignore all of these settings. We will come back to them later. And just click on Save and Display. So this will land you on the quiz page, but this quiz is only a shell. It's an empty folder. Click here on Edit Quiz. Click here on Add and add some questions. So you can add a new question if you want, or you can just add questions from the question bank. And this is what we're going to do today. So you scroll down and you find the category Health and Safety. These are the 13 items that we have in our quiz. If I decide to have a quiz with only 2 questions, I can click on the little box here. But if I want to add all the questions together, I can just click on this little box over here, and all of them will be selected. And I will click on Add Selected Questions to the quiz. So the new page appears and questions added. But if you take another look, you will see that they are shuffled. So the order we had question number 1 is here, 2, 5, 3. So I need to reorder these questions. And the reordering is exactly the same as we do in our Moodle activities. So you need to click here and drag and drop the question to a different location. So 10 needs to go here at the bottom. So I had my 2 description questions. These need to be first. So I'll just drag them to the top. And then my second description question, I'll drag again to the top below the first one. See that when we reshuffled our questions, there are some questions that are clustered together, but some of them appear to have like a page break between. Now this means that we have these questions all appearing on the first page, and then there's a page break. 3 more questions appear on the second one, and the third and fourth each appear on a separate page, and the last 2 on a separate page. I would like all the reading comprehension questions to be on the same page as my description questions, so I can make it a little easier for the students, and they would be able to read the passage and answer the question on the same page. So to remove this page break, I can click here, and these questions will all go on the same page. Now for this one, I have drag and drop onto the image. So this is the, I think it's the vegetable picture. So this doesn't really have to do with the reading passage directly. So it could stand alone as a separate question there. So it could be on a separate page. And this one as well, and this one as well. So the drag and drops, they can go on separate pages. You can still put them all on the same page. Now, if you look at the other elements of each question, you still have the edit button, and this is like the edit button we had when we were creating each question. You can go to the preview, you can delete the question, and you can also see the marks here. If you decide that a particular mark is too high or too low for a question, you can always change it here. So all you need to do is to click on this little pencil icon, and in the window, type a different mark and hit enter on your keyboard. So make sure you do that. If you don't, it won't be saved. So you can change the mark here, and you can change the mark for the rest of the questions as well. Moodle does all the calculations and calculates a total over here. So these 13 questions have a total of 36 marks. Now, I think this was a question we had earlier in the first session about the maximum grade and how these marks are converted. If you would like this quiz to have 36 points, I mean, the maximum grade would be 36. You can always change that and add 36. However, if you like more rounded up numbers, like if you want Moodle to calculate this quiz out of 100, so it will do the calculations and give you the score out of 100 for this particular quiz. So yes, we did talk about the shuffle button a little earlier. If you would like your questions to shuffle each time the quiz loads, you can click here. And you can also choose repaginate if you want, and you can also select multiple items to be paginated together. So once you're done, please remember to click save to save all these changes. Go back to your quiz. So we go back and we find the quiz over here. You click on the quiz and you can preview it now. So you see your question. This is the whole quiz now. It's not a single question like we saw in the other sessions. So your information appears here, and you can see this quiz navigation block. So each card represents a question, and you can scroll down to see these questions. And at the bottom of each question, at the bottom of each page rather, you see next page. So this is where we paginated. We inserted that page break. So you have your second question, and you remember that we paginated here one question at a time. Next page. Next page. Okay, these two go together, and then you finish the attempt. And this is pretty important. Just let your students know that they have to click on finish the attempt most of the times to make sure that the quiz is saved. If they don't, sometimes it's saved, sometimes it's not. We'll see that in the settings. So they can still go return to the attempt if they want to answer the questions, or if they are sure about their answers, they can submit and finish. Right, so we will go back to our quiz here. So it shows a report. The preview is still in progress. We can continue the last preview, or we would rather go to the settings now. So please click here on this action menus. Here you have a number of settings. So if you click on the first settings, this will take you to the whole quiz activity settings. If you click here on edit quiz, it will take you to the page where you have the questions and you have access to the questions and you can change them or edit them. So I will go to edit settings now. And we will start with these settings we have for the quiz. The first setting is the timing of the quiz. So the timing setting, like other online activities, you have to click on Enable to activate your quiz at a certain date at a certain time. And you can also click on Enable to have a closing date. Of course, you'll remember that these should not overlap. So you can enable the start date and the closing date, and it's really good if you have an assessment task where people have deadline to complete their activities. And you can also set a time limit. So remember, you have to enable this first and then set a time limit. In the next section, you decide what happens when the student's time is up for the quiz. So let's say we set 30 minutes for this quiz, and students do not have enough time to finish all the questions. So we have 13 questions, and let's say students only answer 10. So when their time is up, there's one option to allow Moodle to submit the ones that the students did answer automatically. And this is a really good setting because students are really concentrating on answering the questions, and maybe they don't see that little submit button at the end. And you don't want them to lose any points because they didn't click on submit. So Moodle will accept any questions that have been answered without the need for the students to click on submit. But there are two other settings as well. You can allow a grace period. So this will not allow Moodle to collect the submissions automatically, but students will have to click on the submit button themselves. However, when their time is up, they will still have some time left if you want to allow this setting to click on the submit button and submit whatever they have done. So during this grace period, they will not be able to answer new questions, but the ones that they have answered will be saved and submitted if they click on the submit button. The last setting is kind of harsh. So here the students have to be aware of their time, and they have to submit their answers before the time is up. If they don't do that, they will lose all their work. So depending on how difficult you want the test to be or how you want to train your students to be fast and efficient, you might want or not want to use this setting. The next one is for grade settings. If you click here to maximize it. So these are similar to other Moodle activities. You can use categories if you have categories in your gradebook. If you don't, just uncategorize like here. And this is a grade to pass. So you will remember when we were setting up the quiz, we said the final grade needs to be calculated out of 100. So from that 100, students need to have 70 to pass. And how many times would you like to allow your students to do this activity? So if it's a skill building activity, maybe you want them to do it several times, unlimited times, or you want to limit them to a certain number. You can choose that. So if it's unlimited times, which grade would you like to consider to be sent to the grade book? So let's say the student has done this activity 4 times. Which of these 4 times would be sent to the grade book? Is it the highest grade that they achieved out of the 4 tries, or the average, or the score of the first attempt, or the score of the last attempt? The next setting is for the layout of the quiz. So here it's the pagination thing. So it's the same thing we did, but it's a different area. So you can paginate your quiz using that first method that we explored a few minutes ago, or you can paginate it here. You can choose if you want every question on a separate page, or if you want 2 questions, 3, 4, or more questions on 1 page. And then if you click here on Show More, you have more settings. So the navigation method for this particular test is free. That means the questions are not dependent on each other. So if a student doesn't know the answer of question number 1, they can always go and answer number 2, 3, 4, 5, and then if they have some extra time, they can go back to number 1 and think about the answer and try to answer that question. But sometimes you cannot allow that because question 1 is the basis of question 2. So students will not be able to answer question 2 unless they have question 1 answered correctly. In that case, you can click on sequential, which means that the students will only see the questions in a sequence. They will not be able to move back and forth. So the next section, the next setting is question behavior.
I'm sorry, could I interrupt?
Yes, sure, please.
Just checking above there on the new page. Right now you've got it set to all on one page with repaginate now selected. So when you hit save, yeah, perfect. So
yeah,
I think you didn't want that. No worries.
yeah, thanks. Okay, so back to our question behavior. Again, we have the shuffle option. So these questions were already, shuffling the question was already set when we were creating each of these items. And this shuffling only happens when we have multiple choice or when we have different options to be used as the answer to a question. And we already set that, so we don't need to change anything over here. But if we did not set it there when we were creating each item, then we could choose to shuffle the questions, yes or no. And how questions behave. So this could be as easy as you like or as complicated as you like. So the default is deferred feedback. It's all about feedback. So when the students answer correctly or incorrectly, what kind of feedback they will see. So the deferred feedback, which is here by default, is the feedback the students see after they finish the quiz. So they answer all the questions and they click on finish attempt and then they will see the feedback. So you can choose to have this, or you can choose from this drop-down menu to have other types of feedback. So we have the adaptive mode, and this is for questions, usually for questions that depend on each other. So you need to find the right answer to question 1 before you can go to question 2. So to make sure that you get question 1 right, Moodle will give you some hints. And you remember that we already had the hint section when we were designing some of our questions. So if you get a question wrong, it will give you some hints. And so you can try again. And then if the second try was wrong, it will give another hint. And so up to 3 hints, as you remember, can be given here to make sure that they get the question correct. However, they will receive penalties here, unless you choose them not to. And then you have deferred feedback, and you have deferred feedback with CBM. So CBM stands for certainty-based marking, and it kind of adjusts the final grade on a question based on how sure the student is about their answers. You see, in some tests, sometimes we are told like there's no penalty for guessing. So I'm going to show you what happens if you click this. So on my other browser, I have logged in as a student, Eduardo. So this is what he sees. That's his first few questions. And you can see this little certainty option added here. So after answering each of these questions, he needs to decide how sure or unsure he was about the answer of this question. If he's unsure, he takes this. If he's so-so, it's this one. And if he's really sure, he clicks here. And then Moodle does calculations and then come up with a final grade for this question. So it's not only 1 mark that we decided here. This weight over here, this 1, will be calculated on a scale of 1 to 3, and then the final result will be their grade for that particular question. And because I chose that setting, this appears at the bottom of all the questions. This is certainty-based marking. So you see at the end of all questions, Eduardo has, except for the...
Excuse me, Sepideh,
yes. Yes, sure, please.
So do the students have to choose one of these certainty options, or they can just leave it blank?
So if you choose it here, they will have to do it. It's part of the test.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So back to here, you had deferred feedback using CBM, and you also have immediate feedback. So this is for each question. If you want them to have immediate feedback, after they answer each question, they will see that feedback, similar to what we saw in our preview when we were creating each of those questions. And they can also have immediate feedback with CBM. So again, it's the same. The CBM is the same, and you can always refer to that document to learn more about it. And this one, interactive, is a good way to give them practice and to make sure they get the questions right before they move on to the next question. So it's almost similar to the adaptive mode, but there are no hints. Here, they need to, if they get the answer wrong, they click on try again. So they have a second chance. And then they click on try again for the third chance. And then as many chances as you have allowed in the quiz settings. If they don't get the answer, Moodle just marks it as incorrect and moves on to the next question. Okay, this says each attempt builds on the last setting. So it's a good feature if you don't want your students to repeat the whole quiz again if they fail the first time. So let's say the student has done the quiz once and then they fail, and you're asking them to do it again. So when they're doing it from the second time, do you want them to do the whole thing from scratch? In that case, you choose the no setting. But if you want them to only attend to the ones they answered incorrectly, the second time they will not see the whole quiz. They will only see the questions that were not marked as correct. Now the review options here depend very much on the setting of, the feedback settings. So these are the kinds of details that the students will be able to see during the different stages of the activity. So during the attempt, what would you like them to see? These are some of the details that you can tick if they are active, or you can untick if you don't want them to see them here. So if you choose deferred feedback, which means they receive their feedback after the quiz is done, obviously they will not be able to see anything during the attempt. If you want to choose other settings here, then they will be able to see some of these details during the attempt, as well as immediately after, later after, and some of the ones which are still available after the quiz is closed. And then you have the appearance. So this has to do with the student taking the test. If you are doing the assessment or the quiz inside a laboratory and it's a proctored test, you might want the students to show their image while they are taking the test. Would you like to have decimals? And the same option goes for each separate question. So think about a question like the essay type. When you are allocating maybe 10 points to an essay, would you like to have decimal marks or scores for that essay? Like, can someone score 6.5 out of 10? Or would you prefer those scores to be rounded up? And show blocks during quiz attempts. So I'm not sure you noticed when we were looking at Eduardo's quiz page, there were no blocks. So the page is pretty clear. The only block is the quiz navigation block, where they see which part of the quiz they are attempting to at that moment. But the other Moodle blocks are not available here. If you would like those blocks to show, you can choose yes. Now this next setting is mostly used for high stakes tests. So if the security of a test is really important for you, you will need to set this particular setting very carefully. For now, I will say no. I'm going to share two of the documents that I have for safe exam browsers. You can read these and it will give you some idea of how to set it up. I'm just going to copy this and share it with you in the chats. And there are two of them. So the other one is here. The next setting is extra restrictions on attempts. Would you like them to have a password? And the other settings are also useful. So required network address is a good feature. You can only provide the network address of the campus, and that will only allow people inside the campus to attend the test. You might want to enforce a delay between the first and second attempts if above here you have allowed them unlimited or more than one attempt. So if you allow 2, 3, 4 attempts, then you can set this over here. And you can decide, like, if the student fails the first time, would you like to allow some time between the first and second attempt? So they have time, they will go back and review the material, and they will only take the second quiz after a certain amount of time. So you can enable this. And you can say 0 minutes, which means that immediately after they fail the first one, they can do the second one. And maybe you would like to have more time set between the 2 attempts. And then enforce delay between later attempts. So this was only for the first and second. And what about second and third, third and fourth, fourth and fifth? So if you would like to set those, you can also click here on enable. And browser security, if you choose none, the quiz is going to appear in a normal browser, just like Eduardo's quiz here. So he has his normal browser, it's Edge. He can see all the browser information available, and all the links here are active. So it's just a normal page. But if you would like to have more security for the test, you can click full screen pop-up with some JavaScript security. So in this case, the student will not see the quiz in the same browser. A new window will open and it will have some level of security. All right, and finally, allow quiz to be attempted offline using the mobile app. Again, you can say yes or you can say no. Just say no. And the overall feedback. So in this setting over here, you can decide what you want to say if a student scores 100%. So this is at the end, obviously. You can say like, well done, you scored 100%, congratulations, things like that. So this is a message they see when the whole quiz is over. You can also have messages for different grade boundaries. So yeah, let's move down. For the second grade boundary, you can have 90%. So what kind of feedback would you like to give to a student who has scored 90%? Type your feedback here. And for 80%, go on until you cover all the grade boundaries. Right, so the common module settings, the restrict access, activity completion, and the competencies are very similar to the other Moodle activities that we have had so far. So I'm not going to talk about these. I'm going to talk about tags, which is very important these days. So the tags that we use here, as I mentioned previously, are different from the tags that we used for each question. These are the tags which are used to send the activity to the portfolio. To send an activity to a portfolio, you can click here, click on ePortfolio, and send it up here as one of the tags. And you can also click on one of the skills. Or maybe if it's a grammar test or vocabulary test, or if it's something which does not really fall into any of the 4 skills, you can always use other. And it will be set to the binder automatically. So please remember to save and display. So we can preview the quiz now. So you see, your attempt will have a time limit of 30 minutes. When you start, the timer will begin. So students will receive this message and they can start their attempt. And here is the timer. I logged in earlier as Lee Chan and I attempted a quiz. So this is Lee Chan. This is her classroom and all of the classes she's enrolled. You need to click here on Avenue. And then on top, you will see these menu items, you will see the binder. So click here on the binder, and there is the quiz for lead chat.
Sepideh, thank you very much for that clear presentation today. I tried to create a quiz without your instruction before, and what I ended up with was creating questions and not using that question bank option. I was told that I can still find these questions in a bank and use them later. However, I will have problems to find them since they are not properly marked, named. Is that true that I will be able to find it? To be quite honest, I didn't try to do it yet, so I'm just asking that question to you.
Right. So the questions are not lost. They are still there in your quiz bank, and you will be able to find them. But as I showed you on my own page, it's a little difficult to track them down when you have so much going on.
I see. I also used the option of a real-time quiz. And to my disappointment, the questions were visible for my students for a fraction, for 2 seconds, and then they disappeared. And I didn't know how to solve that problem.
Right, so that's a different activity. The real-time quiz is different from the quiz activity.
I see.
Yes, you need to check the settings over there to see what's going wrong.
Yes, but still my questions should be in the question bank regardless whether I was creating them originally for real time or for the regular quiz.
Yes, for
Thank you very much.
Right, so you see I have 2 questions here. I have 50 questions here, 52, 454, 25, 55, 41. So if I don't really categorize my questions, it will be really difficult to find them later on. That's why I suggested that you start with your categories. But if you do have a different system of naming your questions or coding your questions, that's also fine. Like you can search them using the code later on. It's not impossible, especially when you're starting. You don't have that many questions, so it's not really difficult.
So finally, I will be able to categorize them later. That's a very important thing. So I can categorize them now.
Yes, it takes a little time, but it's not impossible.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Sepideh, excuse me.
Yes.
Can I ask one last question?
Yes, for sure.
What are these default categories?
These are the categories that you do not create, and when you have a course, they are there by default.
So can I ask something else? So some people said that they didn't go through category, they just created quiz and then started adding new questions.
Right.
So would they go to the default category then, or?
Most likely, yes.
Okay.
Yes. You have to move them from the default category.